Welcome to Greek for a Week. I'm glad that you are viewing another video as we continue to look at the book of First Peter. You'll notice here that we're going to diagram verses 18 through 21, continuing our overall theme from verse 11, and that is living in your community. This particular paragraph is the concept of being respectful. You could even say being submissive. So as we look at the text here, you'll notice as we work our way down through this, primarily we will be looking at this participle here as basically an imperatival participle that will, in a sense, give us the command through verse 21 with several verses here with the use of gar that will provide for us reasons as well as further explanations for this concept of being respectful or being submissive. So, without further ado, let's get started. We'll look here at household slaves. Peter says, respect your masters. And again, you see the imperatival participle here, the hupata samanoi, your masters. Imperatival participle. Again, how do we respect? The means by which I respect is in all fear. Obviously, that is toward your masters. But what's interesting is Peter continues to describe these masters. So he says here that we are to respect not only to the good and to the easygoing masters, but also, and again, he's emphasizing this second phrase here with the use of Allah, the strong adversative or the strong contrast here. So not only to the good and the easygoing, but also to the harsh and the unreasonable. So basically, Peter's saying that regardless of who it is that's over you, you are to respect them. Why? Again, I respect them because or for this is gracious and commendable. So this also would provide support for the initial imperatival participle, the command there. As we continue, he mentions here this conditional clause, if because of consciousness toward God, someone should endure grief while suffering unjustly. Again, this is gracious, this is commendable. So here he's going to use this concept of enduring the grief, and while suffering unjustly, he will continue that in the next verse. So this is why I have this gar clause moved over to support the initial phrase in verse 19. So I think the gar here is further elaboration. He says, for what honor is it if, while you sin, then you are beaten, you endure that with courage? So what honor is it if you endure this particular concept here of being beaten, when really in all reality what you're doing is you're sinning, and it's that sin then that brings about the harsh treatment? What honor is that? Well, but what honor is it if while you're doing what is right? So here again, the concept of doing what is right, then you suffer, you endure that with courage. Okay, this finds favor with God. So the concept of behavior in light of what it is that you have to endure, I think that's what Peter's trying to bring across. How does he bring this point across? He uses the imperatival participle that we ought to be respecting our masters in all fear. He concludes verse 21, which I'm going to suggest also that verse 21 can continue and provide for us what verse 22 through 25 might look like. He says, for this purpose you have been called. Okay. Why? Well, because Christ, he also suffered and he suffered on behalf of you. Again, what's the purpose there? Well, the purpose is to leave you with an example. For what purpose? Again, so that you might follow in his footsteps. So Christ for sure has provided us with an example of what it means to suffer. We're going to see that in verses 22 through 25. How did he suffer? And it's that example, it's that response that Christ has that we also ought to have. And we, in a sense, have been called to suffer, again, going back all the way to chapter 1 because of our identity found in Christ. So if we look further, we have this concept again. I am urging you, says Peter. Guys, that goes all the way back to verse 11. The concept of I'm urging you, I'm encouraging you to live in your community and to do it, at least in this particular paragraph, do it in a way that's respectful. So respect your masters, verses 18 and 19. How do we do that? With all reverence. Why do we do that? Because it's commendable before God. Then he provides a situation of what happens when I suffer for doing what is good. Okay, basically he says when I endure that with courage, it's commendable before God. Then he continues basically in verses 20 and 21, you've been called to this, you've been called to this, and it's at this point that I think Peter's trying to really hone in on, guys, this is who you are. You're identified with Jesus Christ. How are you going to live in your community based upon your identity? Trust this has been helpful. That's verses 18 through 21. The next paragraph is verses 22 through 25, which will show us Christ's example to his suffering, and also that'll leave us with how we can suffer appropriately. Have a great week.